Hello, this is the AI Lab. Today it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Aline Larroyed. Aline is a postdoctoral researcher at Dublin City University and holds a PhD in international law with a background in linguistics. The reason? A paper she wrote entitled The Fallacy of the File: How the Memorization Metaphor Misguides Copyright Law and Stifles AI Innovation. Let's hear what Aline has to say. Aline, looking at your paper, in your view, what is the biggest misunderstanding behind the memorization metaphor, and why is it such a problem when applied to copyright law?
Yes, Caroline, some people are thinking wrongly, and the biggest misunderstanding is assuming that memorization in AI means something like copying or storing works, as if a large language model were a filing cabinet full of copyrighted material. In reality, machine learning, memorization is a narrow technical term, and it refers to very rare cases where a model accidentally reproduces short verbatim fragments from its training data. So when this term migrates into copyright debates, it becomes dangerously misleading. It makes policymakers think that every model contains protected works and that training equals reproduction, and that's not true. Training is about statistical learning, adjusting parameters to detect patterns, not about storing or reproducing expressive content. So treating it otherwise is a category error. It stretches copyright concepts far beyond their doctrinal meaning and risks over-regulating innovation.
Okay, so you mentioned the fact that at the end of the day, it's a word that is used differently in the context of LLM than it is used in our mainstream language, let's say, when we say memorization. So let's look at what happens inside an LLM, a large language model, during training. Um, how does it function, and why would this process? Why should it not be treated as copyright reproduction?
Well, during training, a model processes large data sets to optimize billions of parameters. So essentially, it adjusts mathematical weights. It captures statistical relationships between tokens of language. The output is not a library of stored text, as some people think. It is a network which is capable of generalization. So no work is fixed or identifiable inside those parameters. And this process is related to learning from patterns, not from copying. This is, I know, very technical, but it's possible to understand it. And if we start calling this reproduction, we abandon doctrinal clarity, because what is happening is parameter optimization, not storage of protected expression.
You mentioned that because of that confusion, that linguistic confusion to a certain extent, policymakers, may have wrong conceptions of what's happening. What do you see as the main legal, economic, innovation risk for Europe if policymakers continue to rely on that memorization metaphor in AI regulation?
Well, I think in general, people are not seeing how severe the consequences are. Legally, we'd see a process that I'm calling doctrinal drift in my article. The reproduction right would stretch to cover statistical learning, which was never its purpose. Economically speaking, compliance costs would explode. So startups, university, and research institutions would face audits, licensing burdens, and legal uncertainty that only large incumbents could absorb. This would be disastrous.
So that's a good point. That's the compliance might mean that the big ones actually are the ones that survive the best, not the small ones. Um, Looking at memorization, at the words, if it is the wrong frame, if it's the wrong word to use in a copyright context, what concepts or what policy focus points would you recommend policymakers adopt instead of that memorization frame?
Well, we definitely need to be more aware of the language we use. We need to move away from metaphor driven thinking and adopt mechanism aware regulation in this case. That means looking at the big picture and describing training as parameter optimization in association with statistical generalization, not as storage or copying. And definitely policy should focus on the right layer, which is, for example, data governance, data application, output controls, not on banning or taxing the training process itself. As I said, this would harm innovation in Europe with drastic consequences in a short term. Strengthening dataset transparency, representativeness, and impact assessment would address real risks. And those risks are bias or leakage, and we should also keep research and innovation alive. So the goal is accuracy, proportionality, and rules that reflect how models actually work.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I call reverse engineering the metaphors and going back to the reality, the technical reality that's behind them. Um, okay, you have your soapbox moment now. If you had to summarize your message for EU policymakers in 30 seconds, okay, let's say 1 minute, what would you want them to take away from your research?
I'd say avoid metaphor driven regulation. Training a model is not reproduction, it's learning from patterns, not storing works. To protect creators and to foster innovation, we need precise, mechanism aware rules, and we need to focus on accountability and fair remuneration, not on myths and metaphorical language. In short, don't write rules for filing cabinets when we are dealing with statistical models. So accuracy, not analogy, should guide the future of EU digital law.